And we are live. Hey, everybody. So we're back here on Views with Verse, where every other week, or most weeks now, I talk to somebody about deity and their views with deity. And this week we have the amazing kick-ass witch, Joanna Devoe.
Hi.
And we're all working. The technology is working and we're good. So, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm very, very good. How are you?
Warm. I think we're both warm today.
I'm
good.
warm. It's just because I've been running around. We're having a beautiful overcast day here, which is my favorite. It's my favorite because I live in sunny Southern California, and overcast day is very exciting, especially this time of year. So I'm loving it.
Mm. Right. Hello, there are people in chat. Joe and Joe, yes. Hello to Michael, Nathan, Willow, Wayward Flower, Arwen Lynch, Willow Rain. Hi. Hi, everybody. And anybody else that's joining us. Okay, so I start these off nice and simply with asking, how do you see deity and what does deity mean to you?
I just spent a month talking about that. I do monthly themes for my business, just on everything, just to it gives me time to like flesh out my thoughts. And sometimes going through the process, I actually learn what I think. But that's a hard question just to ask on the spot. I think God is an energy. I think it is a creative energy, the life force energy that flows through all things. Different people call it different things. I think people anthropomorphize that energy to make it more accessible and to understand it. I used to have a judgment on that, but now I think God is so unknowable. It's such an unknowable thing that it's the only way for us to just like touch the hem of that garment. Like it's so beyond our capacity to understand that I think working with individual gods and goddesses, like a lot of pagans do, or Christians working with Jesus, or not worshiping, I guess, Christians. It's a way for understanding God from one particular lens. So, and I believe God is in everything. So I've been waffling a little bit between pantheism and animism because I definitely have a sense that God is in all things, but I'm not entirely sure if all things are one, which I want to reject because that seems a little monotheistic to me. And I have a big ego, so I don't like the idea of dying and then like going back to the God soup, and not being Joanna anymore. I hate that. That doesn't feel true to me because I don't have that experience. Like that's beyond my understanding. What I love is the idea of animism, that everything has its own soul and that I am my own soul and I go on after this. But my soul is a little piece of that God energy. So
I love that. That's
awesome. A good answer? That's my answer.
So we're talking a little bit about kind of like the evolution of your path in there, because it's kind of been like, right, well, I started off wanting to feel a certain way and that's kind of evolved over time. So how has that looked for you? Like, where did you start and then how did that kind of evolve along the path of deity, I guess?
Well, I was born into the church. Like my family was very involved in the church, and the church was everything I knew growing up. And when I say the church, I mean Mennonite Brethren, Christian. And really everybody we knew were Christians. And that was like a locked in paradigm. So me and Jesus were like this. I had an ongoing relationship with Jesus. And for me, what's interesting is I always experienced Jesus, well, in two ways. All throughout my day, I had an ongoing conversation with Jesus. I just prayed all the time. I was just always talking to Jesus, but also in nature. So like if I was laying in my swimming pool and like looking up, or I saw a beautiful anything, a rainbow, a sunset, mountains, it was always about nature in that way, which I did not realize would actually come full circle when I got into witchcraft and all of that. But and then I had a falling out with it. I don't know how much you want me to ramble on about all of this. So I will pause there and see where you're at with it.
No, that's fine. That's cool. I mean, I don't think at any point on Views with Verse we've actually talked about people who have started in a Christian place and kind of I don't want to say evolved from, but altered to a slightly different perspective. So I go for it. Absolutely. Everybody, hi everyone in chat. We've got a load more in chat now. Hi.
I can't see the chat, but hello.
I shall relate back, chat. So if you have any questions, just pop them up, and I will.
If anyone tells me to fuck off, you can wait.
I won't say that. I don't think they'll say that. They're all lovely.
Yes, I know this. I watch videos. So, gosh. Where do I go with this? The falling out, I guess. When I was I had a lot of questions about Christianity and what happens to us after we die. And the answers weren't very satisfying to me. But what really made me start questioning things is just Christians who weren't walking their talk. Mm-hmm. And that, just now looking back, I can see like my mom's friends, they were so young. They were in their 20s and they were in that phase of their life. But when I was a little kid, you look up to the adults and they're supposed to know everything, So I was like holding them to this standard that they set. And they weren't living up to it. And so I just started noticing a lot of hypocrisy and judgmentalness, like judging other people, that really got under my skin. And then I had a grandpa die who was, who I loved. And he was my dad's dad, and he was not a Christian. Mm-hmm. So when I say everybody I was involved with was a Christian, there was this one outlier, right? And when he died, we went to his funeral, and I asked why there wasn't a pastor conducting the funeral or why we weren't in a church. We were just outside in nature in a cemetery. And I was told by someone that he wasn't going to go to heaven. And that was it for me. I was like, that's not true. I just know. I actually know that's not true. I don't know how I know, but that's not true. It actually didn't even upset me at that person. It was like a break inside. And then after that, I say, I guess, because people always ask me how long it took, because a lot of people go through this. I get a lot of email about this because it's something I talk about on my podcast. People want to know, how long till you don't feel guilty, like you're going to hell? Because the indoctrination is so thorough that every single cell of your body is like hooked into this programming. And so it took me approximately, just guessing, 8 years after that point, before I didn't worry that I was going to hell or that I was doing something wrong or that I was bad. And then a lot of that time was spent exploring New Agey everything and a lot of Eastern. I really gravitated toward Eastern philosophies and religions and stuff like that. Not anything that I got super involved with. It was just kind of a dabbling, like exploring these things, meditation, and really interested in Taoism and Buddhism. And now, again, like once I landed on witchcraft, it made sense to me that when I was a kid, I would experience God and Jesus through nature. Mm-hmm. And then also that I would immediately gravitate toward these Eastern philosophies because they're so focused on nature. They really, really embrace the natural world. I was just talking about feng shui. That's a nature art. Taoism is all about nature. And then the other thing that really appealed to me is that in the religion I grew up on, am I rambling too much?
No, go for it. I'm loving it. We're loving it.
I get fired up about this. The religion that I grew up on, we prayed all the time, and some of those prayers were gratitude, but a lot of those prayers were thanks, but we never listened. We were like talking at God, but we weren't listening to God. And what I loved about Eastern everything was this emphasis on listening, which is how I perceive meditating. Shutting off your mind and letting, I got really into channeling too. And I found that I think we can all channel. I think it's a human thing, but I was very like instantly good at it, able to do it. And I went a little off the rails with that for a while, like up late at night, like channeling, like all this like stuff. But it was so fascinating, like having this energy that you can literally feel come through the crown chakra, like, and down your body. And it pushes me like this, like I could feel it pushing me when it was there. And I started out doing automatic writing. And so I had like this giant dinosaur of a computer, like when you touch it, no, it's sit there like, oh my God, like I couldn't keep up with what it was coming through. And a lot of it would just be like ABKLDF, Perry, like a bunch of random stuff. And then all of a sudden, like these messages would break through I just let my hands go at where they wanted to go. And it would just be like nonsense. And then all of a sudden something would come through, and it was always really beautiful and beyond me, thoughts that I was definitely not having. So there's something that I was tapping into, whether it's my higher self or God or who knows what, I don't know. My guide is what I always call it.
I love that you said, I don't know, because I think that's really key to what the whole Conversations with Deity is about, because ultimately we have feelings and thoughts and we think we're getting an inkling of what we think is truth, but ultimately we don't know. And I love that about it. It's like, I want to learn, I want to seek, I want to know, but I accept that I don't know. And that's kind of an awesome place to come at it from.
Yeah. I always think too, the more I know I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like the never ending rabbit hole. And it's endlessly fascinating. That's how I knew when I started my business that I found the thing, because I was such a creative person. I'm a writer, I'm a dancer, I'm an artist. I do all these things. I was in a band and I would go through phases, but this is something that's been consistent about my entire life. And it just never gets old, like ever. It never gets old. So, yeah, forever I could travel down that rabbit hole and be perfectly happy.
So now it's so vivid said, that's what broke me away from my brand of Christianity, Roman Catholic, was the idea that we started off guilty.
Yes, original sin.
And right, you're gonna have to forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong, but Zara Claney said, I loved the church, but I hated the repetition and regurgitation of the same pattern of this particular prayer and gospel, which just felt false to me. So I guess that's sort of like the lack of allowing something to evolve, which is kind of what we've touched on already a little bit with regards to your evolution of your path, is that Zara is good. Okay. That Christianity and a lot of the religions that like it, they feel very stagnant to me. Like they don't allow a person to explore and question as much as some of the pagan side of things. So that's very much about, no, go figure it out. And the Eastern ones seem a bit more like that as well.
Yeah, it was explained to me that I was in danger because I was smart, and which, by the way, I hid for a very long time because it was partly because I wanted boys to like me and partly because I didn't want to go to hell. It was a win-win. I was told that people that are very, very smart, that think a lot and have a lot of ideas, and people that ask a lot of questions, they're easy prey for Satan, because Satan can get in there and taint your mind. And we have rules, and there's a way things are supposed to be.
Owen says sin is only fun if it's original. And Kylie says, the only thing I know for a fact is that I really don't know. And this for me is where I found peace and has stuck with me for years now. Yeah, absolutely. So where did you go from Christianity and from the Eastern religions? Because then you started walking into witchcraft. And I know that you've said, and when we've talked before, that you didn't feel that you were a goddessy witch.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I have to carefully word this because I've publicly vowed that I will never say that sentence again. Okay. But let me say, I used to say I am not a very goddessy witch all the time. And I get a lot of email for that too. A lot of other people, women writing in and saying, oh my God, I'm also not a very goddessy witch. And that's because I rejected anthropomorphized deity, right? And if, for people who don't know what that is, it's the personification of deity, putting a face on it, right? So if there's no God, then there's no goddess. And it felt, that was one thing about, that's why I never really became a Wiccan. I have borrowed a lot from Wiccans, and I love the Wheel of the Year. I love working with nature. I love magic. I was into magic long before I picked up my first book on witchcraft, maybe forever. Those things were attractive to me. But when I got into it, it was just a lot of noise about pantheons and like, what's your matron goddess and what's your patron god? And I was like, what are we doing? Why? Like, we don't need any of this. People, I've been doing magic forever and connecting with my guides. Like, we don't need this stuff. And I still think that we don't need this stuff. But it is a pleasure, and it is there as a form of guidance. And it is very powerful once you tap into that. So I work with archetypes and this mysterious guide that I used to channel, right? And God, I could just get all windy and crazy and twisty with this because it goes in a lot of different directions, like everybody's path does. But let me briefly tell you about Pisces, because I think that's like key. That happened before I got into working with the goddess. One day, this is crazy, I channeled for years and I never asked my guide what its name was, ever, not once. It just didn't occur to me. I didn't know what I was talking to, if I was talking to like a collection of energy or my higher self or what. And then I kind of just stopped channeling. I didn't need to, but every time I meditate or use my mala beads or chant or anything, that energy is with me. I can call on it anytime I want, anytime. And it answers me in synchronicities or in, like, I get that whoosh that I talked about, or like pushes me like that. I have this little incantation that I do that I learned. I mean, if something works, I just stick with it. So the way I learned to channel was from a book called Opening to Channel. And maybe it's changed in my mind over the years, but not much. It's, I ask all high guides from the white light and love, from the fifth dimension and above, to join me now. When I ask that, always, I feel that thing, right? So one day I was like, I want to know who I'm working with. Like, what is this energy? And so I asked it its name. And then I went on a walk and I saw these little black baby kittens. I don't really know what kittens have to do with it, except this was the moment. I think my heart opened. I saw these like adorable, brand new little baby kittens, like tumbling in the yard and being so cute. And I just heard, I felt clear as day, Pisces. And I was like, Pisces, what the hell is that? And so I was like thinking about it on my walk, like, that's so weird, because I didn't know very much about astrology at that point. I had been working with the South and the North Node, and I knew my moon, sun, and ascendant. And that was all I kind of needed to know. But I thought at that point, I didn't have any Pisces in my chart, which is not true. You have every single sign represented in your chart. But for years, I thought I had no Pisces in my chart. And it wasn't, I just never thought about it. I didn't have any Pisces people in my life. So it seemed so out of left field and bizarre. I was like, this is just weird. Why would its name be Pisces? And then through further just, I don't know, just wondering like, why? It just started occurring to me that Jesus is represented by the fish sign. Mm-hmm. And Jesus ruled the age of Pisces. And I really talked to Jesus when I was a kid. I loved Jesus, and I had this ongoing relationship. And, you know, Christians identified themselves to each other back in the day by putting this fish symbol over their homes. And a lot of Christians today, especially the Christians that I grew up around, they would have that bumper sticker with the fish on it. We had the fish in our kitchen. We hung our keys on it. It was like a key rack with the fish. And I was like, oh my God, have I been talking to Jesus this whole time? And now it's like coming at me in this kind of witchy way, you know, just like by a different name. I started thinking like, I'm getting chills on my face just talking about it. Like, I think I've been working with the exact same guide and energy my entire life. And it was just, if it would have said Jesus in that moment, I don't think I would have been like, okay, it's like old programming, you know. But because it said Pisces, it gave me time to like think about it. So that's really when I was very much working with an astrological archetype. Some might call it a deity. It's just my guide. Then I got very involved in Athena accidentally.
Whoops.
That was kind of similar too. I was like, so many of my friends were goddessy witches. You know, it's very weird to say I'm not a goddessy witch. It's like an oxymoron or a contradiction in terms. And so I was just driving in my car and I was like, do I have a goddess? Like, who's my goddess? Who wants to be my goddess? I kind of put that out to the universe. And then I, like, right after, pulled up behind this giant water truck, and it had in like sparkly letters, Athena. I drove by the sign of it, and then it was huge sparkly letters, Athena. And I was like, huh, that's weird. I know nothing about Athena. And then I turned the corner and I went to drive down the street and I got stopped right in front of a building that said Athena across the top again. And it was like I think a retirement home or a medical center or something. But the point was, it was like, Athena, all sparkly, Athena. Okay, let's figure out what's up with Athena. So again, I'm rambling. Let me pause to see if you want me to keep going.
No, that's cool. I was just thinking, it's just like big sparkly letters. Here you go. That's
very so Hollywood.
Yeah. No, that's cool. So yeah.
So because I was not a goddessy witch, I knew nothing about goddesses or Athena, and so I did some digging around. And there's a book called The Goddess in Every Woman that people love. Friends love it. People love this book. You can read quite a bit of it online for free, and you can read the entire Athena section, which is what I did. And it completely pissed me off. I was so mad. I was furious. And all of a sudden, like, I was like the defender of Athena. And as I dug around online, I started seeing this same, what pissed me off in that book, represented. By the way, people really love that author. I love her. I will tell you what pissed me off in a second, but I'm not dissing her. But it infuriated me what I read. And as I went around reading about Athena, it was like, she's this cold bitch and who betrays other women, in essence. Medusa and there's other stories about doing this. And I was like, that's bullshit. I know that's not true. Again,
yeah.
I have these kind of knowings. And it might just be my truth. Do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily a knowing for everybody. It's just what's true for me. And I wrote a piece for Dawn's blog called In Defense of Athena, which I still love because it really, really came from the heart, and I was very fired up about it. I still get fired up when I think about it, but it was really focused on the Medusa story and how I don't believe that a goddess would betray other women. And when you go back further in time, before the patriarchy took over these goddess myths, Athena was not that. She was a patron of the arts. She was an advocate for other women. And so I kind of did this retelling of the Medusa story, in which a lot of people say Medusa was raped, and Athena was jealous and in a rage, and so she had her head chopped off. And so I wrote this whole piece about how she turned her into a gorgon, and with the snakes and all of that stuff. You know, if she looks at men in that manifestation, they turn to stone, right? Well, she was raped. I believe Athena did that mythologically, of course, we're just talking about mythology, as an act of protection, to protect her, so that she had the power to turn men to stone, and to be in her power and to be in her righteous rage and protect herself. And I believe that's why Athena wears Medusa on her breastplate, over her heart, over her most gentle, tender, you know, the most beautiful part of herself. She protects it with Medusa head. And so, again, I have chills. Like, I don't know.
Me too. I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel very defensive, and I am angry for women. And so that was meant to be my goddess. And I would say she is going to be a lifelong traveler with me, because I feel very, very, very passionate about her. So let me show you this too, because I drug this out. This book, am I doing this right?
Oh, yep.
It's really pretty, and it's called Lost Goddesses of Early Greece by Charlene Spretnak. I don't know. This is a retelling of the Greek myths, if anybody wants to see. Pre-Hellenic, so before the patriarchy came in and like fucked up these goddess stories. Sorry, I keep swearing. I'm a swearer. Okay. Is that okay?
It's okay. Go for it.
Especially when I'm like all fired up. Like,
yeah, you asked about Athena. You're getting passion.
I'll do. And so obviously we don't know those goddess stories because they were erased from history, like so much of mythology just was. And that's a big part about conquering anybody, any land, any culture. They go in and they don't just abuse them physically. They don't just abuse them sexually. They don't just abuse them mentally. They do all of that. But what I learned from this Dr. Catwoman is her name. Not like Catwoman, a superhero, but Catwoman is her name, is that even more powerfully than abusing them physically and mentally is abusing them spiritually. And they do that by taking their gods and goddesses away and wiping clean the mythology, so that so many generations in, it's gone. Gone. And
yeah. You can talk about that with the Celts as well, because the Celtic stories, they get demonized, they get turned into fae or saints, depending on how lucky they are. And they become dark and scary and lesser gods. And then all that's remaining of the myths is written by Christian monks. And so you have to take it all with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
Molly is goddamn slow clapping over here. So I'm going to open up in the chat and say, do you have any questions about Athena, while I give a thought that I had when you were talking about Medusa being turned into Medusa by Athena to protect herself. And I was thinking about how snake imagery is very much tied in the Greek to the health with your staff of Asclepios. But it's always been very sexual being, the snake. I mean, you can see that within temptation within Christianity, and it's very much tied to like female sexual power in a lot of ways. And it feels like there's that underlying thread there, that she became like a symbol of her sexual power. Like all the snakes are very much, you know, I can be powerful and sexual and raw, and I'm not here for you to take sexual advantage of me. It's not about you, it's about me. And it's like Athena gave her that. That's kind of what I was getting.
The Kundalini energy too, Kundalini rising, that's represented by a snake. And I think our power and I want to clarify righteous rage. I want to say our rage, but for me, when I experienced rage initially in my, in my teens and in my 20s and in my 30s, it was a very like rebellious like thing. Righteous rage, I think, is more focused and it's more about being in your power. I think those things go hand in hand with our sexuality. And that's why that Kundalini rising experience is such a sexual experience. It's such a hot experience. Susan Weed talks about menopause as being every woman's like rite of passage into the Kundalini awakening, because there's all the hot flashes and stuff. But we literally are snakes, by the way, or giant worms, if you want to think about that from like mouth to anus. We're like these long tubes that have all these like weird protrusions. We're like super fancy snakes. So I always think of Kundalini rising like that. And to go off on a crazy tangent.
Okay, so Christina asks, what about the myth of Arachne? How would you approach that story, Joanna? Spider is important to me, and I believe Athena's crafter artist aspects comes through with spider energy for me.
Yeah, I haven't given that myth a lot of thought, but it's another one that totally pisses me off because it's another one about Athena being a bitch and trying to suppress other women. And I see her as an advocate. So the way I would tend to think of that story is that she was supporting her and encouraging her to be a total badass, and that they were having like, it was a challenge. Like if you work with a sparring partner, if you're working with a teacher in any kind of martial arts or anything, you have to fight the teacher to improve your skills. But the teacher isn't going to kick your ass. The teacher isn't trying to, well, they might a little bit to teach you like what you're doing, but it's to empower you so that you become the badass. So I would say that the two women that she was mentoring her and that she is a patron of crafty women everywhere.
I would wonder whether or not Arachne's energy, Arachne's power animal, if you like, a part of Arachne was spider. Like her inner essence was spider. And by turning her into a spider, it's not necessarily that she was turning her into a spider, but bringing out the crafting ability, bringing out that element of herself. Like rather than it being like, I'm going to turn you into this because I'm jealous. It's not, it's drawing out what needs, I'm getting chills. It's drawing out what needs to be. And that's the same, you could say that's the same thing that happens with Medusa. She draws out the animalistic parts of women to protect or to help them flourish in environments where they're being suppressed. And that's what I wonder. That's how I felt about it as you were asking and talking about it. So
no, I love your mind.
Is there any more questions about Athena before we move on a little bit? That was a good question. Thank you. I'm just going to go.
Water all over myself.
Caffeinated Witch says so many myths have been distorted for the male gaze, and I'm not having it. Honestly, love this discussion.
I really, really love men too. For the record, that is something that just blows my mind. If you say you're a feminist and you get being a man hater, I'm like,
I know.
I don't want to. I just want to stand on the same. I just want to stand together. I don't want to stand behind you. I don't want to carry your shit. I don't want to clean your house. I don't want to be your secretary. I want to be your peer. Like, what is wrong with that? And that's, the mythology supports the Christian mythology that Western culture is so steeped in, supports the suppression of women. And that's why I think feminism is so important.
I totally agree. I present myself as a feminist. I don't get too much accusation of man hating. I've had a little bit because people are like, oh no, you don't want to be feminist, you want to be humanitarian. And I'm like, why can I not be both? Like, why can you not be a humanitarian and a feminist? How does that work? Oh, that's a
also,
good question.
Athena is the patron of Athens, and she's known as being a very masculine energy. So a lot of men work with her too. So she's not just there for the women; she's there for everybody.
Jake asks, what about Athena's counterpart Aries? Any thoughts on that?
No, because I don't know enough to have a quality thought about it. Let me just say that. I will say I do. Now that I said that, Aries is the war god, right?
Mm-hmm.
Athena is known as she is an energy that people call in war for war, but it's a different energy. Her energy is very mental. I equate her with Libra and the Queen of Swords in Tarot and the Justice card in Tarot. And she's about strategy in war and having to not fight. So like using your mind to get the thing done instead of shedding blood. And so that's why I think she's a powerful emblem of like war. People say that she's like a warring goddess, but she's not. She's about strategy, and that is actually in the patriarchal mythology as well. So they're both about the war, but one is gonna like cut your head off, and one is actually gonna, you know.
It's kind of inspiring in a way that managed to sort of subvert the patriarchy. That element of her was like, no, you can't rewrite that. What are you going to do? It's in so much of the myths that you're not going to be able to get rid of that. So you might as well give in. That's amazing.
Yeah. Powerful too, because this is what we've learned, for better or worse. I'm really into propaganda. I've been talking about this for years on my podcast, and really, during the election and stuff, I wanted people to see how propaganda works. A war of the minds. I believe I have like a magical formula. I think thought leads to emotion, emotion leads to belief, belief leads to action, dun, 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 like that. When you manipulate people's minds, when you implant false narratives, alternative facts, lies in enough minds, you change their hearts and you get a mob mentality going on. So mind wars are the wars of the future, I believe, and they're far more powerful than shedding blood. Because if you just go in and kill a bunch of people and imprison them, you're never going to have their heart. They're always going to be looking for their escape. But if you can turn them into prisoners in the safety of their own environment, when they're going to the grocery store and hanging out at home, because you've wormed into their mind and changed their mind and changed their belief system, you own them. Yeah. You completely own them. Yeah. You can do anything you want. And they're so indoctrinated into the propaganda that they let you get away with it. So it's no small thing to have that power. And it's every power has the light and dark side, the positive and the negative side. So I get all fired up about, don't ask me about Athena, because I'm going to start levitating. I get so excited.
That's okay. Karen says, I've just joined, and I was just wondering what you would think about mental illness. That's a huge crow just flew past the window and scared the living daylights out of me. Like depression, anxiety, etc. Seeing as we were just talking about the mind and Athena and the mind.
What can she be more specific? Because that's so broad. That is something I talk a lot about too. Again, on my podcast. But can you ask more specific questions so I don't just start rambling off like a crazy person?
Did you have a more specific? How do you mean? What do we think, Karen?
I think mental illness is prevalent in the spiritual community. That's something that I've noticed. And I think that's because it's a slippery slope to talk about this, but I have two ideas about it. I think it's because people with mental illness are very drawn toward fantasy. And I think a lot of the magic and the mythology and stuff really comes to life for those people in a way that it doesn't for most other people. And so that's very attractive, I think. And then also, I think people that are suffering from mental illness a lot of times have an awareness that they're suffering from mental illness, and they're looking for answers and they're looking for help. So, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned depression and anxiety, and I am going to say there's a scale of mental illness. So like mental illness is anything from like the depression and the anxieties and things which are difficult but manageable, to things which are, you know, full on, you need medication to be able to just deal with psychosis and things like this. So when we're talking about mental illness, there's a scale. So if I say what I feel about certain mental illnesses, I can talk to you how I feel about depression and anxiety, no problem, because I suffer with depression and anxiety. So I can talk about that, no problem. But that, and I don't suffer from that as excruciatingly as some people suffer from it. So it's all relative to who it is, what they're dealing with. It's a very difficult subject for us to be like, to talk about. And I've talked about it a bit on the channel, on my channel, because people are like, well, how can you work with a goddess like Morrigan if you're depressed? Doesn't it make life worse? Don't you get more depressed? And I'm like, no, like that's not how my brain fires. I guess what working with Morrigan has done for me is help me to find the resolve, to see the battles of my mind and of life, and to conquer that in a fashion, to overcome in a fashion, to give purpose and meaning, which is a bit like what Joe said with, you know, coming to spirituality, to make sense of these things that are happening on an internal level, and to find some sort of peace, some sort of acceptance within the self, because a lot of mental illness can be incredibly debilitating. It can feel incredibly lonely, like, because there is still a huge stigma with mental illness. And I encourage people to be like, think of it the same way you would think about it if you had like a lung disease or whatever. If you need help for that, if you need medicine for that, go get help for it. It's not a thing to be ashamed of. And spirituality can be a supportive environment, but it shouldn't be a crux, because I think then you're missing kind of what spirituality can be, and maybe should be, but loosely should be about, that you're using it for a particular crux of yourself rather than exploring yourself as a whole, maybe.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about that too. I had extreme anxiety and depression and bouts of agoraphobia, where I was afraid to leave my home. And despite working with Athena, despite being an air sign, despite being such a Queen of Swords person, I think one of the worst things that you can do when you have a mental illness is focus on the mental and try to fix your mind, or really gravitate towards spirituality, which can become like an escape. It starts to become escapism. Your mind is not a safe space. It's a tool, right? So, getting into your body is really important. And the reason I know so much about psychology and personal development is because I tried to fix these things through the mind. And I reached to spirituality, I reached to psychology, I reached to personal development. I learned a lot and I healed a lot that way. But I did not end the anxiety and depression until I changed my diet. When I did that, I was like, oh my God, why didn't anybody tell me this? So I have to say that right here. I say it to anybody who will listen to me. Mental illness, the mind-body connection is real. And very, very often, it is a food allergy. It is a toxicity in your body. It can be heavy metal toxicity. We live in a highly toxic environment. And so it's really important to address the physical, and a mainstream doctor won't do that for you. A lot of psychologists and psychiatrists won't do that for you. It's a journey you have to kind of start out on your own. And I recommend looking for a functional medicine doctor. And some holistic doctors will do this as well. But a functional medicine doctor is a really good place to start. There's a book I recommend called The Mood Cure by Julia Ross, MD. It's not the whole picture, but it will give you some ideas about how gluten, for example, can watch your mind. But really important to that. And I believe also that our bodies and our homes are expressions of our soul. and that we can communicate with our psyches and the deeper layers of our body that way. When you think about anxiety or you think about depression, you might have your mind racing, you might have depressing thoughts, but you also might have physical symptoms. That's the way I experienced it. So if I was depressed, I felt like there was like lead in my veins. I was so heavy, and getting off the couch was just like an effort. And then it does start messing with your mind, because then you feel ashamed and guilty, and what's wrong with me is like a big question. Like, what is wrong with me? Everybody else is living their life. Why can't I do this? If I had anxiety, I was literally like, I can't breathe. My heart is racing, and I think I might be having a heart attack. So it's very physical, right? That's a clue to look to your body instead of your mind. So going off track with the God and Goddess talk, but I feel strongly.
No, I think we can tie it back in. We can Virgo it up. We can tie it back into deity. We can say our bodies are like an expression of our inner spark of divinity, and because that inner spark of divinity runs all the way through us, the connection between the mind and the body and the spirit are all interconnected. One ecosystem.
And turn to Mum Gaia, turn to Mother Earth. Let that be your goddess that you work with for a while. Kick off your shoes and go grounding, which is walking barefoot in the dirt or the sand or the grass. That literally has an electrical charge that will create a shift in you. And start educating yourself about eating like real food straight from Mother Nature that hasn't been tainted with chemicals. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, Lauren. Okay. So, in my opinion, no amount of spell work or spirituality is going to fix me if I don't also take action in the mundane. My brain doesn't hold on to serotonin correctly. That's a very physical thing from the caffeinated witch. So I actually have had to give up gluten. Gluten is one of the things that interferes with both my spiritual sense and my body. And it's been an interesting journey without gluten. But if I eat gluten now, like my body physically shuts down. Like I crash. I physically shut down, and it's like my body disconnecting from spirit, my body disconnecting from everything, and my body shuts down, like very physically. But it's also a spiritual thing. It's also in the head in a painful way and in a kind of like a mental way. So I can both
casein, which is the milk protein, and gluten, which is a protein found in wheat products and other grain products. It gets through the gut lining of some people. It's called intestinal permeability, and it creates an opioid effect in your brain to where you can have anything from autism to anxiety to depression. It messes with your mind. So you might not experience the physical symptoms. You might experience it as mental health, or like you were saying, a depletion of serotonin, which is the feel-good, happy drug that we want to have to live a happy life. So yeah.
Wayward Wildflower asks, do you think there are specific diets that work better, like vegan, vegetarian, paleo? I'm not sure about that one, but yeah. What do you think?
I would say an ethical plant-based paleo diet. And when I say plant-based, I don't mean vegan. I mean just based on plants. So you're focusing on vegetables, you're focusing on greens, or a vegetarian diet would be cool. It would be even better with like some occasional fish and stuff like that. I would not recommend a vegan diet for someone with mental health issues, but that's just me. I know all the vegans are going to start yelling at me right now.
I was like, I'm not touching that. I know what happens every time I touch vegans.
I was 100% raw vegan for a year, and then I ate a high raw diet and was vegan during that time too for a period of time. That's something that the experts argue about, and people want to be like, look at this book that proves my point. Well, look at this book that proves this point. My book was written by a doctor. Well, my book was written by a doctor too. So you just have to find what's true for you. But what will always be true, like your guiding North Star, is follow Mother Nature. If it comes from nature, if it hasn't been made in a factory or produced by man or altered by man or sprayed by man-made chemicals, you're on the right track. And then it's just a matter of finding where, you know, you experiment with veganism, experiment with paleo, but try to like let Mother Nature be your guide, and you should be all right.
So Anastasia says there are many different experiences, causes, understandings, I think, of mental illness. There are even experiences that are actually spiritual awakenings that the medical community would label as being chemically imbalanced. Some come from trauma or natural responses to an unnatural world or an environment. So, yes. I think that's not... It's not quite where we're at. We're talking about like imbalances in terms of, so I guess she's talking about the uses of imbalance within spiritual awakening.
And some people, like we were talking about Kundalini energy and snake energy and all of that. Some people think they're going crazy when that's happening.
Yeah.
And the people around them think they are. I mean, it's a slippery slope. That's a hard subject to broach because we
need more than an hour, basically.
Yeah, we don't live in a society that supports you going off the rails for like 6 months. We can't afford that a luxury unless you're independently wealthy and you live out in the country and you can't, you know, like, and you're not, because you're going to go to jail, or you're going to go to the mental institute, or, you know, your family's going to be concerned about you if it's very extreme. So I would like to not touch that, actually.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, if we get there, we're going to be there for another hour. I think instead we'll talk a little bit, because more recently you've obviously had some Celtic flourishings, appearings, and that's very close to my heart. So, bye, Chris. I like how I pitched my voice, like she needed me to be louder. Bye. It's like she can't actually hear you, Jo. So it's Ceridwen.
Yes.
That you have come into fruition with recently. How's that been?
Yeah. You know what? I will say I loved Laurie Cabot's The Witch in Every Woman, and that was maybe the only time I've read a book on mythology that I could get the mythology and I understood it and I cared about it. And that is about the Celtic mythology. And Ceridwen is in that book. I read that years ago, quite a while ago now. These are accidents. I never have just been like, I'm going to work with the Morrigan and, you know, like throwing myself into it that way. I really love Sacred Source. They create like these really cool sculptures and pagan statues and stuff. And, you know, once you look at something on the internet, it like locks you into this algorithm and it just starts showing it to you everywhere you go. It like follows you around. And I have looked at this Ceridwen statue many, many times because I just think it's gorgeous, and there's just a whole story in the statue. You know, she's there with her cauldron. She's not presented as a crone. It's interesting because when you say Ceridwen, a lot of what you look up on the internet or what people will say is she's a crone. She's actually a triple goddess. But to me, like, the core of her mythology is the mother, and she's a very sexy, beautiful mother in this goddess, or in this statue. But I just became enchanted with this statue, and I kept staring at it. And so then it would, you know, pop up and follow me around on the internet. And I just kind of became obsessed with it. And went back, busted out my copy of A Witch in Every Woman, read her mythology again, Laurie Cabot style, bought it. And I would say this is more of like a gentle easing into of a relationship. On the full moon, I went outside with her. I had like this basket of all my witchy stuff. And I got a Ceridwen incense from a company called Dryad Incense. That is the best incense in the world. It burns so clean and beautiful. And so she has like a designated special incense for when I work with her. And she's kind of my, anyway, I dedicated her under the full moon as my kitchen witch, but like hearth and home. And And so she's hanging out on an altar in my kitchen. I do a lot of kitchen witchery. So I like light a candle, light her incense. It depends on what food I'm making because incense and food don't always go together. Or if I'm cleaning, I've been doing a lot of decluttering work. And I just kind of talk to her and, you know, ask for guidance on certain things. And something when I first talked about her in a mega vlog I did that I loved is a friend of mine who has a special needs child. I have a special needs child as well. Mentioned that she's kind of like a matron goddess for women with special needs children. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that, because in her mythology, she has this son that the world thinks is ugly. It's portrayed in different stories. He's black, he's dark, he's ugly. I mean, what does that tell you about racism right there? That like people, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's interesting that, I mean, you can read that in two different ways, but as just like literally being like black or, but whatever. I just always thought that was interesting, but he is not, there's something wrong with him. Right. And so she spends a year and a day crafting this magical potion and pouring all of her heart and all of her energy and all of her witchy knowledge into crafting the most perfect, beautiful potion that's going to imbue her son with like all of her wisdom and make him, you know, attractive and powerful and beautiful in the world. And that's what every mother wants that has a special needs child. It's what every mother wants, period. But you know, you're extra protective of your kid, and you want the world to see them how you see them, and you would give up your life for that, you know. And so I just loved that, of like this mother spending like a whole year and a day pouring herself into creating this potion. And then of course, some jerk face comes along and steals the potion. But then the mythology launches into so much symbolism that I love and already really relate to. I think she represents the wheel of the year. I think she represents the elements. She's a shapeshifter. She's chasing that little, I want to swear again, that little effer that stole her kid's potion. And they like start shape shifting into these different animals, but it's first like a fire thing. Like she turns into a greyhound to chase them, and she's very, very fast. And I think of that as like a fire thing. And then they go up into the air. They become the air element. They become birds, and then they dive down into the water and become like a fish and an otter, I think. And then it ends with the earth element. She becomes a speck of grain. Or he becomes a speck of grain, and then she follows that. Yeah. So I love it. It's like all the elements. It's the wheel of the year. It's the phases of the moon. It's just it's so much to tap into. And I'm really just at the beginning of that. And it's very different than my relationship with Athena, I would say.
So there is some interpretations of that myth that because she then gives birth to Taliesin, who is Merlin in modern mythology, but Taliesin in it is the originally Merlin was a title, so there would be many Merlins over time, but the one that we now know as Merlin from the myth is Taliesin, who was birthed by Ceridwen. And some interpretations of the myth is it's the same child.
Yeah,
it's her son.
I thought about that.
And that she is actually like chasing him and teaching him to shapeshift in terms of being a magical being. And then when he has gone through all the elements, when he's gone through all the lessons, that she then takes him into herself and rebirths him into this magician. So she accomplishes what she set out to do. So there isn't a separation there. It's elements of the same sun.
I like that.
I think it's a better interpretation of rather than being like, right.
Yeah.
You're gonna get it now. But that makes more sense to me, because the year and the day thing is something that carries over to modern magical practice. So she makes the potion of Awen, Awen. Awen is divine inspiration. It's the voice of the gods. It's this year and a day potion was created by Ceridwen. And so that is like the god soup, if you will, like the creatrix of all life, inspiration that she makes for her son So then that myth makes more sense to me if she then like tests her son and to sort of push him to become a shapeshifter just like her, and then rebirths him, and rather than being ugly anymore, he is one of the most famous, most wise magicians of all time.
Oh, that's badass. I love that. Yeah, I love that. The way that I was thinking of it before is because my journey with my son was like this. The way that I came to this is my son has autism, for anybody who does not know that. And a big focus of parents with autism is on fixing their kids. And something I did choose not to do was put my son through a lot of these hardcore therapies. And I'm glad, because he's the happiest person in the world. He is like the happiest, most joyful, sweet person. But what happened is I got to a point where I accepted him completely for how he is. And then I saw him with new eyes. And I saw that, like, oh my God, he's like an angel. He's like the most beautiful, joyful person. There's nothing wrong with him. In fact, I need to learn from him. He knows so much more than I do about being a happy person, living a joyful life, being kind. And isn't that what we're all trying to get to? Like through all these like weird mental ladders we're climbing and all this spiritual stuff, he just came in like that. And he just is like that. And so I was kind of thinking of her as being like, okay, whatever, dude. Like, I'm going to send this guy off down the river to find a new home. And I'm just going to accept my son for who he is. And we don't need magic. He's already perfect. He's already divine.
Absolutely.
I like both of those versions, though. I really like yours. It's something I had thought about because I like to contemplate the mythology and kind of shape it around a little bit, you know, like what makes sense to me, what feels true. So I did have a moment of contemplating what you were saying, but I've never heard someone else explain it like that.
Well, it made more sense to me because at no other point, either in engaging with Ceridwen, which I have a little bit, or reading around her as well, I've never felt like she had a cruel streak just because somebody made a mistake. And some version of the myths, he takes the potion, and some versions he drops 3 droplets on his hand by accident when he's stirring, and then she becomes vengeful. And to me, she never had that vengeful energy. She just wanted to look after her son. And so to me, that's kind of like how that naturally seemed to fit. Like, and there's a lot in the Celtic mythology of people being like shadow kings of one another. So they're like interconnected. They are
I love that.
elements.
Love that. Thank you. I think you just added a new layer. I love that. That's so great about talking about this stuff. Like, to me, like, I stopped wearing this ring that I used to wear that said solitary witch. I still really love it. But I just had this thought one day, like, I'm not really a solitary witch because of conversations like this, you know, like the one woman gave me the idea about her being kind of like a patron for parents with special needs kids. And then I talked to you and you gave me this other idea about, you know, these two sides of the same child. And talking to other witchy people is so important. If you can have an open mind and an open heart.
Libby says, I have a special needs kiddo too. When I became a witch, I went looking for special needs mom at matron, and it was Ceridwen. I love her.
Yay!
I call my daughter my rainbow baby. She shows me the spectrum of human experience.
Is this Beck? Are we talking to Beck?
Libby DV.
Oh, Libby. DV. Oh, I know another woman with a special needs. She has a daughter and she calls her Rainbow.
Anastasia says the vengeful part of the story always confused me. Yeah, I don't feel like it is vengeance. That's doesn't make much sense to me either, and that's why I felt like they were the same child. Because
I love that.
Because then it became more about helping him to grow and be a magician than it was. Like, she spent all this time on this potion, so it makes just as much sense to me she would take as much time to show him he can shapeshift.
This is so good. I'm so glad you brought her up. I'm like really now like feeling this. Like, this is good. Thank you. This is good. It reminds me of what we were saying about Athena, you know, like
bringing out the best parts of ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. She's driving him through his shamanic awakening. Exactly.
Gorgeous.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So Holly Howell, for a while I felt drawn to Danu and didn't know why, because I had a hard time finding much information on her, other than her being a mother goddess. Any ideas or feelings about her? I don't know if you've come across Danu, Joe, or shall I just...
I also love her statue. That's all I can say.
It's one of the first statues I ever saw was of Danu, and that was the first inkling that it might be a Celtic path for me a long time ago, before I even thought to add 2 and 2. So we're talking about deity today, Mashia Moon. So for Danu, there is not a lot of myth. And I have a video about Danu. I've talked about it maybe once, maybe twice. So there is a couple of videos on my channel, and my feeling about Danu was that you kind of have to go with a personal gnosis, because there isn't a lot of surviving mythological evidence to start with. And the thing about mythology is that it's a very important part of the past and a very good place to start, but it doesn't have to define your spirituality. It doesn't have to be the be all and end all of your interpersonal relationship with deity. So try not to panic that there's not like all this myth, because the thing about myth is tales written by human beings. It's interpretations of stories, often rewritten and rewritten and rewritten by human beings. So it's just people like me and you writing down myths, and it transcends through history. So if you really want to work with Danu, just gather what you can find and then go explore. Like go from a heart place, from a soul place.
I always think it's good to ask too.
Mm.
Just to ask, just, you know, say a little prayer, a little request to the universe. And keep in mind too, like I was saying, when I was channeling, like I was working with a nameless energy for years, for like over a decade. God is faceless. God is unknowable. Like it's a force, it's an energy, it's in you. And so I think mythology is cool and it can give you a starting point. But there's so much you can explore on your own. Just ask for guidance, and I think be open to synchronicities. And I bet you'll start hearing the name pop up here and there, or just having interesting dreams or insights showing up.
Raven Dreamer said most of my stuff to do with Coronanos, saying it wrong probably, Coronanos.
Yeah, it's hard.
Has come through my relationship with him. And that's a lot of what we're actually talking and kind of dancing around, really. We're actually talking about our relationships with deity. That's what we're talking about right here on the channel, and what Jo has been telling us about her different relationships with deity as it has evolved, as it has shifted a little bit, even just our perceptions, basically, of what we think we're getting through little channels. And relationship is the thing. Relationship is what we're doing. We're forming relationships and bonds to something other than ourselves, something both outside of ourselves and inside of ourselves. And that's kind of what we're doing, forming relationships.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. You can grab onto the smallest little kernel. And I worked with Ganesh at a time in my life when I felt like I really needed something, just based on the fact that he was the remover of obstacles. Like I had a poster of him, I did a drawing of him, I had this little statue thing of him, but I was just doing this a chant to Ganesh, focused on this idea that he was the remover of obstacles, and that's all I knew. That's all I knew, was like, I'm removing obstacles. I'm saying this chant. I have no idea what it means. And guess what? It worked. And I did that for a long, long time. So I don't even think you need a full anything in your head to tap into a certain energy. You just need a willingness, I think.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's more about heart. I think whilst we've talked about the mind being an incredibly powerful tool, and technically the heart is part of the mind anyway, because your emotions are in your head, but to go at it from a place of heart is often a better way about it, because if you overthink it too much, you'll talk yourself out of it. Easy. I'm a Virgo, I know. like who'll be like, oh well, I'm doubting myself, I'm doubting my spirituality, I'm doubting these signs I'm getting, I'm doubting these synchronicities. And it's like, is your heart telling you that, or are you like overthinking? Like, go to a place of heart first with
I don't think you can get it wrong either, because you are God. God is in you.
Yeah.
You are a unique expression of the divine. So if it feels sacred to you, if it feels true to you, it is. It is. And the only measuring stick of if you're getting it wrong is like the peanut gallery, other people's opinions, and other people's opinions have no business in your personal spirituality.
Absolutely. That's a whole video unto itself. Right. I'm going to do last call for questions. We'll have a look at Meisha says, I am a new witch and I've had, I think, 2 deities call to me, but I'm not sure. I was wondering if I should wait longer to see if anyone pops up. I don't think it's about time. I think it's like we just said, it's what feels right to you rather than it being about time.
Yeah. And I think there can be different deities for different times. Like you can go on a little journey with someone, and then you have like an Athena experience where you're like, oh my gosh, I think this is a lifer, you know, like this is, I don't know. There's a different feeling that I have with that than I do with Caradwyn or when I was working with Ganesh. Like you can go on journeys, and that's perfectly valid as well.
And Libby's kind of touching on the same thing by what to do if you're interested in working with several goddesses and receiving signals from several. I mean, if we're talking about approaching several different goddesses, I don't do this, so it's a bit difficult I kind of do this when I do crafting, but approach from a place of respect and just, again, opening your heart again. But for me, there's no reason that you shouldn't work with several different goddesses, because ultimately we don't know whether or not this is all different expressions of one overarching force, or they're very, very real in terms of like their personalities, but they're still part of one force. We don't know. We all argue about it, but we don't know. So ultimately, if you feel comfortable and you want to work with several goddesses, go for that, and just start a conversation. That's how I would go about it. Just start a conversation, see what happens. How about you, Jo?
Yeah, I guess I do have my dogma about it. I feel, I guess I don't think you can do it wrong. I don't think you could. I think you could be a very spiritual atheist and not work with any gods and goddesses, or you can work with a whole host of them from a variety of different pantheons. I just think it's very personal, and how God presents itself to you is unique to you. So yeah, I'm not chiming in there. I just do your thing. Do your thing. If it feels good, if it feels true, if it feels right, I think you're good.
And Good Fate says, do you stop working with one deity if another approaches you? Do you wanna do that, or shall I do that? No.
I still work with Athena. I have my little Athena altar in my bedroom, and that's who I call on when I'm out and about and just doing things. But it's a different energy. Like that's like, I need strength. I need to know what to do in this situation. You know, but then I'm thinking of Caradwyn in terms of like being a mother, keeping my home, protecting my home, creating potions and food and things like that. And so they just have very different vibes to me. And then Pisces, I probably work with more than any goddess, because that's my dude. Like we've been together, I think, my entire life. And like when the shit really hits the fan and you get like something horrible happens, it's interesting to see, like, you know, if you're a former Christian, you might just start calling on Jesus. It's just like, you know, that's when you really start understanding like, whoa, this is the energy that I turn to when I'm like, it's life or death and I'm terrified. So you can like play around and explore with all this stuff. But when life starts to get really intense, it might show you like, you know, what's there to really assist you.
So I work with the Morrigan relatively exclusively in my personal practice. I draw down and speak to other gods and goddesses with regards to my business, which basically the Morrigan told me, you're a conduit, do it. This is your calling, go for it. This is what we're going to do. And occasionally other deities will show up. Brigid is one that seems to freely come and go with the Morrigan. I've talked a bit about this with Laura Daligan, that kind of sister energy, kind of like Morrigan kind of is just cool with Brigid coming. And so she's just like, yeah, she's a mess. She's emotional. Deal with her. And then Brigid will be like, right, we're going to have some healing before the next Morganic lesson. And that's kind of a thing that happens. But I mean, some people feel that they need to stop a certain part of their life and then move on. But it's not something that I've ever done. And like, if any other deity is involved in my personal space, which would be, but not unheard of, I wouldn't give up the Morrigan for that. So, no.
I mean, interesting to note too the difference in how the two Joes are talking too. Like for Joey, like these are real sentient beings. And so there's a different respect level there, whereas I am like definitely more like rock and roll, like it's all just like part of like, you know, the same thing. Although I will say, in working with Athena, she's become real to me, and that creates a kind of reverence. But it didn't start out that way. It was, you know, it evolved into that for me. So I don't know if that's a projection of my own creativity and imagination and soul coming through, or if she's really like manifested in this way for me. But it's fun to hear Joey talk about it, because those are two different takes, I think, on that energy.
Which is awesome, which is exactly the point, which is exactly what we want. We want to celebrate all the different ways of seeing deity. That's what we want. Raven Dreamer says, don't mention Hades, Joey. He'll show up in your curtains again. I'm not mentioning Hades. Hades follows me around everywhere still. I'm like, have you asked Morrigan's permission yet? No, then we're not having a conversation. Like,
that is funny. I haven't looked for Satan. I don't know. I think because it was such a scary thing growing up that I love all things Satan. I think it's hilarious and fun. And I like, one of my favorite emojis is the Satan emoji. And there's a song, I don't know if you guys remember this song. It's like, Satan, 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 Satan. That's like the whole chorus. Every time we'd come on the radio, I'd be like, wah! That might be my Hades.
Okay, are there any last questions before we wrap up for this episode? Any burning questions you want me to put to Joanna Devoe before we're done? We're going to tick over. It's your last shot for today.
Thanks for the questions, guys. That was awesome.
Chat's been wonderful again. You're all amazing.
Definitely.
You're all amazing, chat. Some good questions as well. I like the Arachnia one especially.
And Libby, hi. Thank you for showing up too. I always like to meet other parents with special needs kids. We have a special thing.
I think that might be it. I think that might be it for questions. So that's awesome. That's a good place to end it on. So do you want to plug who you are and where people can find you? There are links in the down bar. I made sure of it, but for the last.
Okay. Well, I am Joanna Devoe. I'm Joanna Devoe everywhere you go. I'm hard to get a hold of on social media except for Twitter, because I love Twitter. Twitter is my happy place. But I'm on Facebook. I post on my business page there, Joanna Devoe. I'm on Instagram sometimes. But my website is just joannadevoe.com. Kick-ass witch, putting the K in magic. And I do a weekly podcast called Hippie Witch, Magic for a New Age. And I guess that's the most popular thing I do. And if you want to get a sense of what my work is, maybe hop onto iTunes and check that out.
And I've been there twice on the podcast. So
yes,
go check the podcasts out. They're awesome. It's such a good.
You were on in the God month. We talked about God. If you guys want to continue this conversation, Joey was just on the podcast talking about her take on the goddess.
Okay. So I'm Joey Morris. You know where I am. You're watching me. But you can find me at facebook.com/starry-eyed supplies, or at starry-eyed-supplies.co.uk if you want witchy items. That's me. That's my shtick. So you can find me at any of those places. I have Instagram and Pinterest and all that good stuff, but the easiest place to go is probably Facebook, and you can find most of the stuff from there. So that was it for this episode. Thank you so much to Joanna for joining me. Thank you guys in the chat for joining us. You've been amazing. Seriously, like, you blow me away, chat. But yeah, so that's it. So thank you for everybody, and bye.
Thank you, Joe.